One piece of career advice you wish someone had given you when you started out?
I guess the reflection of kind of starting, I would say, as a manager rather than as an advisor level. Best piece of advice that I would look back and give myself would be to be the best version of yourself. And I say that in that I always want to be the best, but can never define what the best is. Best leader, best manager, the best sustainability professional. And it doesn't exist, the best, because it's a mindset of what you set for yourself, and therefore is that attainable and achievable? Probably not, because I recognise there's a perfectionist in me. There's a desire to always excel, and to always achieve that kind of top A-class, A rating. And what I've come to recognise is it's about the human uniqueness in me, and that actually the power of me being the best version of me enables me to get the best out of who I am, that I can draw that authenticity as me, as Chris, and as a leader, and that's core, I think, to kind of inspiring change and the role that I play in the decarbonisation of our industry. And I think that if I would have had that, I would have been much more comfortable in being a manager at the beginning of my kind of tenure of when I started to lead people and manage people, because I didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And how do you kind of take people to trust them, to empower them, and to get them to deliver? And there isn't a book, there isn't a course of training. You go through experience, and you have to learn the errors and the mistakes of your ways to then get better and improve. And therefore I think that it's really, really key to kind of look inside of yourself and understand you as a person, to then come out of it to be that better version.
Share a pivotal moment in your career that you feel has made a significant impact.
So pivotal, I probably will use a time that kind of almost all came together really nicely. So about 5 years ago, coming to 6 years ago now, became a dad for the first time. I've become a dad for the second time and the third time since. But also, I started to want to know about me and understand me, the complexities of who I was. Why did I get triggered in certain ways and certain scenarios? How did I respond to kind of alpha males and dominant characters at work? I get very anxious, very worried, beat myself up at times, so kind of the outcome not being what I was hoping for, what I needed for. But also was going through a change of organisational design as well. So kind of the organisation I was working for in the business, we took a very hierarchical business of reporting lines and structure and brought it to an agile flatline structure where there was no hierarchy. The decision making and empowerment came at the various levels, at the right levels across the business. And I guess being a dad, I would say, shapes and changes your perspective, and that had the impact at work, but also wanted to know about me, and kind of learning who I was. So I took coaching for the first time in my whole career. So that would have been 2018, so that would have been 12 years in business. And for the first time I decided I needed coaching. I needed a behavioural specialist, a psychologist almost, in understanding me and the complexities to me. And it's difficult at first because I was facing into all of my fears, all into my, what I would call the shields that I hold, of kind of very Brené Brown's thought process of the scars and the burns that we hide as humans and as leaders to protect ourselves from the bad stuff that happens. And I was having to be vulnerable for the first time. And the impact of how my upbringing and the various stages of primary school into secondary school into early adulthood, how much they shape you And I never actually realised until someone takes you through that whole journey that you get to understand what are your triggers, why do you hold on to certain mindsets, and why do certain experiences you keep forever in your mind. And they're usually the bad stuff that happened. You will hold those. That's your protection. It's your mind protecting you. It's your risk. They're saying that there's a risk out there, therefore you need to be protected, and your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system's all kicking in. And from being an example of being a boy at 5 years old and having an experience of having to go to primary school for the first time and not liking it whatsoever because it was new, I didn't like change, that shapes me of not necessarily dealing with change well and unexpected change. And that's triggered all the way through from me being a 5-year-old, and I hold that all the way till I was 35, and not understanding it. And kind of, I guess, that pivotal moment there enabled me to understand me. And I don't think as a leader and as a manager, unless you understand you and you can face into your vulnerabilities and know what triggers you and know what makes you you, be it the good, the bad and the ugly. We're never perfect. I'm not a perfect leader. I make mistakes, I make errors, I'm human. That's just nature. We will never get that perfectionist and perfection right. But what it does, it shapes my mind, my thinking, that I can be authentic. I can be Chris Cleveland. I can bring my true self to work. I don't necessarily need to be as that. The fable is it's a great little fable in a tale that it's called The Peacock in the Land of Penguins. It took me 20 minutes to read, but it's all about diversity and the power of not necessarily being a penguin and having to follow and conform to what that norm is, but actually the strength that you bring as an individual and as a professional and as a leader to think differently, to act differently, is your superhero powers. And it's about them finding the right environments at work that meet your purpose, your vision and your values that can bring you to life. And I think the role that I play as a sustainability professional ties in really nicely with what my personality is and how I have to be and understand me. But equally, I know that I need to inspire. I'm going to have tough days. I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have good days. But how do I still have that resilience in me and be that core natural leader that can persevere through that as well? And I think that, for me, enabled me to show up as a leader, to be curious, to question and to treat everybody as an individual. But I'd also say that the reason why I kind of reflected as kind of being a dad as well is that it makes me a better dad. It enables me to be able to not be a leader and be a manager at home and those bits, but actually to appreciate the emotions that my kids go through, to understand that actually the impact that I make to them will shape them. And therefore, how do I have that? By taking that approach and mindset, and it's never about treating the people that you lead as children. It's an adult to adult, peer-to-peer respect. But knowing that as much as your intent is out to be positive, the impact may be negative for that person. And therefore, you've got to understand that individual and adapt yourself, and you know where your good, your bad, and your ugly is, to then be able to get the best out of that person and work together. And almost where the strength of diversity goes so much wider than just kind of looking at individuals and labeling them into pockets, into bands, into kind of boxes. It's the power of the thought process. I know what my gaps are. I know where my blind spots are, and I still need to work on those, and I've got plenty more, I'm sure, as I progress. But I can choose the right people to fill those gaps in. And I can get the best out of those people by seeing the gaps they have that I, as a leader, I can inspire, but they can help me grow as well. And I say, for the last 5 years or so, that practice and that appreciation has relaxed me at work. It's given me the voice and the comfortability to know where I'll get triggered, know the scenarios where I need to do more resilience, I need to build myself up, but equally not to have fear, not to fear hierarchy, not to fear alpha characters or red characters, know that I'm not a red character, but equally to appreciate where they are, empathize and walk in their shoes, and know actually how do I bring myself to actually balance and have a voice in there as well.
How would you approach challenges and setbacks in your professional life, and what's your go-to strategy to overcome them?
So challenges and setbacks. So I see challenges and setbacks. I'm going to term the word failure. And I guess what I do and understand myself is I don't necessarily differentiate between failure and success. So I treat both of those as exactly the same outcome. And therefore, a setback in my professional career will be to understand what's gone wrong and actually accepting that there is failure and that you can't always get it right. And there's a great theory by Amy Edmondson over in the US, and kind of looks at basic failure, complex failure, and intellectual failure. And it really resonates with me so much in that we won't succeed every single task and activity, but we should never go out with the mindset we're going to fail this. And my mindset is to be curious, is to kind of try to appreciate the unknown and almost do the opposite of what I'd say the world we live in right now. So the world we live in is very much VUCA. There's a volatility, there's so much uncertainty, there's so much complexity, and there's so much ambiguity of what does the world need to look like economically, from a sustainability perspective, from climate change, just from what we're experiencing day to day. But how do I take that and turn it into a vision, an understanding, clarity, and the agility to respond, and not fear failure? There's an aversion, there's a fear, and there's confusion as humans. It's natural as humans to fear failure, but actually to embrace it, to accept it, and to understand it when it doesn't go the way that you want it. And it gives me that ability to recover and reflect and go, what would I do again? And there were some studies done a couple of years back that I've researched on, and looking at adaptability quotient, whether AQ is the same as kind of a level of IQ and EQ. There's still lots of debates about it, but it's how do you adapt to scenarios of those challenges to learn from them and not to make those same mistakes again. And I say that with kind of challenges, setbacks, and successes. Now, successes can be by brilliance, or they can be by luck and by chance of an outcome that you want. And sometimes all the planning could just fortuitously land perfectly in the perfect place, perfect time. And that practicing of the $1 million shot with Gary Norman and kind of the golf, and you practice, you will hit that perfect ball. And it's kind of the more practice you do, the more successes you have. But actually, there's always got to be that reflection of understanding, well, what went good, what didn't go so well through that process to still achieve the outcome that you wanted. And it's that kind of right curiosity to have a balanced approach for the outcomes. Now, when I do have failures and setbacks, I can pick those up. I use a very simple formula that I've built from a well-being resilience perspective, is where stress plus recovery gives you resilience. So it's a very simple formula. Stress is something that exists with us, be it good stress, positive stress, negative stress, bad stress, but it's the recovery piece that's really, really key. And the recovery isn't always about going for a run. It isn't always about doing something that's going to be physically active. It doesn't work for everybody. And therefore it's about you understanding you, and kind of almost going back to, how do I understand me as Chris? How do I understand what I'm conditioned to be, what my triggers are, but also what's my recovery? And for me, my recovery is music. I love music. And I never recognised this in me. And I always thought, because being from London, I put my headphones on the tube so nobody talks to me. And that kind of what I would say is very kind of typical London tube-esque. Headphones on, nobody talks to each other. And therefore I thought I was just conditioned in that way. But what I actually was doing was that recovery from work. So building my music, having music on, going to work and traveling to work, coming home from work was all about me recovering from the stresses, the trials, the tribulations, and it was my break from work to home, and therefore I could go home and hopefully be as de-stressed and recovered as possible, but building my resilience up and using music and the way that I felt and how music inspires me, how it makes me feel, all different types of genres. And it's all about understanding that music and the mood I'm in and how that helps me. And I still have to do it. I pleasure of being able to hybrid work now. So I will be in the office and I'll still have my headphones on when I'm going to and from work. And I know now, I'm recognizing I put certain music on because it's certain ways of recovery and how I'm feeling. But also at home, I recognize that I need to still have that break from hybrid working, and therefore that recovery area for me is the music. That may not be my headphones, that may be a device that I use. I won't say the name because they will appear and start to kind of speak. But that helps me. That helps me reflect and then reset to go again. But also the go-to strategy is recognizing that I'm not a single person in my team. I'm one of many that work in the team in sustainability and my peer network. And therefore to seek that feedback, to seek that reflection, and to understand from others, what can I do? How can I get better? How can we get better? How can we learn from this with no negative connotation, that positive reinforcement of what would we do differently if we had the opportunity to go again? Where were those pitfalls that we didn't achieve the intended outcome, or the project didn't go to plan, or the exec didn't buy into the investment that we needed, the technology, the fuels, etc. that we're looking at, it didn't work. Why is that? Let's not get beat up about it as a negative and say we are failures, we're not good enough, thou shalt never achieve. How do we build this into a thought process, a curiosity, a driver to seek those alternatives that can make the difference in sustainability, in our professional careers and our learning, that will hopefully not make those same mistakes, or we'll get to a position where we're recognizing and being triggered that we have the same scenarios that happened beforehand. What would we do different? We pause, we stop, we talk about it, we engage, we think, we kind of adapt ourselves, and we go again.